A vampire, a werewolf, and a ghost move into a house together in Bristol and try, harder than anything, to be ordinary. That is the whole show. It is also a lie they tell themselves, because a vampire who does not feed is one bad night away from a massacre. A werewolf spends one night a month screaming while his bones break, and a ghost cannot leave the building she was murdered in. John Mitchell was turned in the trenches of the First World War and has been running from what he is ever since. George Sands was scratched on a Scottish moor and hides a monster behind a nervous smile. Annie Sawyer was pushed down her own stairs by the man she was going to marry, and she is still standing in the house, waiting to work out why she cannot move on. They just want jobs and a kettle and someone to talk to. What they get is a vampire uprising that farms humans for blood, a zealot with a cross who hunts their kind, a train full of the dead, and eventually the devil himself. Before this is over, the entire household you meet in the first episode is gone. Every last one of them. And a new vampire, a new werewolf, and a new ghost inherit the same impossible job. Being monsters, guarding the humans, and trying to stay people while they do it. Almost everyone you are about to meet dies trying. This is every episode of Being Human. Annie Sawyer is lying on the floor of her own house, blood pooling under her head, already narrating her own death. She figured she had decades left. She got 20-something years and a bad fall down the stairs. So that is the first thing you learn about her. She is dead, and she is annoyed about it. John Mitchell died worse. In a foggy forest in the First World War, he walked into a nest of things feeding on the wounded, and their leader, a smiling man named Herrick, turned to face him with the teeth out. Mitchell woke in a pile of corpses with bite marks on his neck. For a vampire, death is not the end. It is the paperwork before the beginning. 100 years on, he takes a woman named Lauren home, sleeps with her, feeds on her, then sits on the floor, knocking his own head against the wall while she bleeds out on the bed. He hates it. He does it anyway. George Sands is the third one, and George just wants to be left alone to be miserable in peace. 2 years ago on a Scottish moor, a wolf tore into him and killed the man beside him. Now every full moon, George strips off in the woods and screams while his bones rearrange. He and Mitchell take porter jobs at a Bristol hospital and move into Annie's old house, not knowing the previous tenant is still at the window, watching them carry the boxes in. Then a pizza man knocks, and he sees Annie. She nearly cries, because being seen means she is becoming solid again. And solid is the closest a dead girl gets to alive. She celebrates by making tea she cannot drink and covering every surface with mugs, until George reminds her, gently and then not gently, that she is a ghost. The full moon comes. Annie insists on watching, and she watches her sweet, awkward friend fold in half and become something with teeth. And when she says his name, the wolf lunges, and she is suddenly outside, shaking. That is the domestic part. The other part is Herrick, who turns up at the hospital doing card tricks and tells Mitchell that everything is about to change, that a vampire is a shark, and sharks do not apologize for the sea. And soon Mitchell will have to pick a side. Meanwhile, Lauren, newly dead and newly hungry, corners a nurse named Becca on Mitchell's date, cuts her throat, and dares him to save her by turning her. Mitchell refuses. Becca dies on the floor. And outside the window, a strange man in the dark is watching the house, the way Annie once watched it herself. The man in the dark introduces himself. His name is Tully, and he tells George the one thing George does not want to hear, which is that he is a werewolf too, and he has come to help. Tully talks his way onto the sofa, quoting scripture, breaking bread with a vampire, teaching George the practical side of the curse nobody warns you about. Pack spare clothes. Double bag them. Your stomach rejects raw meat for months, so expect to bring back up whatever the wolf eats. Tie a chicken to a string and drag it in a wide circle so the wolf follows the smell instead of wandering into a village. It is genuinely useful, which is the problem because Tully is poison. He touches Annie, which hurts her, and pushes himself on her until she is badly shaken. He whispers to George that Mitchell keeps him weak on purpose, and on the night before the moon, he confesses the truth. Tully is the wolf from Scotland. Tully is the one who scratched him and killed the other man, tracked down through a newspaper report because George is the last human he ever connected with, and Tully cannot bear being alone. I needed you to need me first, he admits. George is disgusted. He calls the curse God, stamping on them with his boot, and walks away while Tully begs him not to leave. But Tully leaves a gift for someone else. Lauren has sent Mitchell a video, a recording of him feeding on a man during sex, a trophy meant to remind him what he is and pull him back. There is no cure, she tells him. The only thing left is his conscience, and one day he will surrender that too. You can check out anytime you like. You can never leave. Annie's grief is breaking the house. The taps run, the mugs fly, and the something trapped in the walls is her. To cheer her up, Mitchell introduces her to Gilbert, a ghost from 1985 who can see her, a hopeless music snob who falls for her on sight. Gilbert explains the rule that runs the whole afterlife. Ghosts stay because of unfinished business. Finish it, a door opens, and you cross over. So Annie decides wrongly that her business is Owen, her old landlord and ex-fiancé, and cooks for him while Gilbert watches the woman he loves chase a man who does not deserve her. Then the house gives up its secret. Cooking in Owen's honor, Annie walks straight into the memory of the night she died. Owen came home, found a stranger's underwear, decided she was cheating, and in a screaming rage did not push her down the stairs by accident. He killed her. The fall was staged. The man she was going to marry murdered her in her own hallway. She comes apart. Gilbert holds her and tells her he loves her. And at that exact moment, the door of death appears. It has come for him. His unfinished business was to feel love once before the end, and now he has. He steps through, telling her that all this time he just needed to meet her. And Annie is left knowing how she died, knowing it was not enough to free her, and still with no idea what will. Mitchell finds an unlikely lifeline in a bullied kid named Bernie and his lonely mom, Fleur. Babysitting, bowling, old Laurel and Hardy films. It keeps him off blood, and it is the happiest he has been in decades, which is exactly why it curdles. Bernie borrows a DVD from Mitchell's room and grabs the wrong one, and Lauren's kill video, the one with the sex and the blood, ends up in the boy's hands. Fleur finds it and draws the only conclusion a terrified mother can. Within a day, the word pedo is painted on the front door. The house is pelted with rotten fruit, and a mob is forming. One of the policemen who turns up is a vampire, offering to make the whole thing disappear the old-fashioned way. Mitchell says no. George, meanwhile, tries and fails to tell Nina the truth about himself, and when the rumor reaches her too, he panics and pushes her away rather than explain. She leaves wounded, telling him that one day, when he has driven everyone off, he should remember she would have listened. Then it goes fully wrong. In the middle of the mob, Bernie runs into the road and is hit by a car. Mitchell holds the dying boy, and at the hospital, he tells Fleur the truth, proves it with a mirror that shows no reflection, and offers her the only thing he has left. He can turn Bernie at the point of death, but he asks her honestly whether a life like his is a gift at all. The scene closes on a small voice saying, "Mum, I'm hungry," and a weight Mitchell will carry a long way. George finally shows Nina his scar without naming what it is, and Annie, hardened by everything she now knows, makes her decision. She is going to haunt the man who killed her. Guilt over Bernie knocks Mitchell off the wagon, and he walks back to Herrick, whose headquarters is a funeral parlor, chosen because cemeteries and hospitals and funeral homes are the places where the two worlds meet. Herrick lays out the plan, a recruitment drive aimed at the dying, eternal life for the terminally ill. Hospitals turned into museums. No one gets left behind. It sounds almost kind. It is not kind. Mitchell finds a back room full of runaways, kept for weeks, fed on over and over, children's toys under the beds. The voluntary recruitment is a lie. People are being farmed, and when he confronts Herrick, the truth comes out flat and honest. Herrick never wanted to turn everyone. He wants a portion of humanity kept pure as a food supply, because underneath the speeches, it was only ever about feeding. Mitchell refuses to go further, so Herrick decides Mitchell dies as an example. While that unfolds, Annie tries to haunt Owen and fails badly. He does not break. He calls her a sulk, taunts her, and later stands in front of his girlfriend Janie and gaslights her flawlessly, insisting he cannot see the ghost he is plainly looking at. "He just keeps on killing me," she says. George and Annie storm the funeral parlor and drag Mitchell out seconds before he is staked. And Lauren, ruined by what she has become, asks Mitchell for the last mercy. He brought her into this world. She wants him to take her out of it. He stakes her, and this time, it is real, and she is gone. Then, Annie finds her power. She tells Owen a secret only the dead know, hints at the wolf and the vampire standing behind her, and leaves him so frightened he walks into a police station and asks to be locked away for his own safety. They commit him. Her door of death appears at last, and then the front door buzzes. It is Herrick, come for revenge, and he tears into Mitchell while George and Annie scream at her to take her one chance and go through. Annie does not go through. No ghost has ever refused the door, and refusing it unlocks something in her, because now she can see other dead people and travel far from the house. Mitchell is in a hospital bed, his body unable to make new blood. his wounds healing too fast, doctors starting to ask the wrong questions. Josie changes everything. A woman Mitchell loved back in the 1960s, now old and dying of lung cancer, she offers him her own blood so he can heal and fight, telling him death is not always the unwelcome guest he thinks it is. She dies, giving him the strength to finish this. Mitchell strikes a deal, a final showdown on a hospital rooftop on the night of the full moon, in exchange for George and Annie getting a day to run. The full moon is the point. George will be a wolf, unable to fight, which is exactly how Mitchell wants it. He is trying to keep his friend out of it. But Herrick has worked out his own role, and it is stranger than anyone expected. He never wanted to lead. He wanted to be killed by a werewolf because a wolf's bite is death to a vampire, and Herrick has decided he is not the king at all. He is the key. I am the beginning. There will be more after me. So he comes to the hospital as George is turning, provokes him, and when Herrick lunges at Nina, the turning George catches her in the chaos and scratches her, passing on the curse, and George stops being afraid. He unleashes the wolf and kills Herrick. Mitchell begs him not to, warns him he can never come back from it. George does it anyway, to save the woman he loves, and calls it proof of his humanity rather than the loss of it. Herrick is destroyed, but Nina has been scratched, which means Nina is now a werewolf. Josie is dead. George is coping with murder far too calmly, and in a locked psychiatric ward, Owen gets a visit from people who look at his file, nod, and tell someone above them, "We found them!" The revolution was supposed to be over. Somebody just took notes. Herrick is dead, and the trio are trying to act like a family in a pink house in Bristol. It is not going well. Nina has moved in, but she is cold and flinching and furious. And eventually, George finds out why. When he scratched her fighting Herrick, he passed on the curse. "You gave it to me, George. I'm a werewolf. Congratulations." It is catching. Two vampires arrive from out of town, Ivan and his wife Daisy, and Ivan makes it clear he has not come to take the throne. He has come to watch it burn. "There's a power vacuum here. I just want to sit back and watch the flames." Mitchell tells them any attack on George is an attack on him, and declares the revolution canceled. Annie, now solid and visible, decides to build a real life and lands a job pulling pints at a pub for a sweet, awkward man named Hugh, whose name she can never quite remember. Mitchell meets a lonely new doctor named Lucy, apologizes for her missing goldfish by buying her a new one in a jar, and something tentative starts. And somewhere in a clinical white facility, two people you do not yet have reason to fear seal a captured werewolf in a decompression chamber built to cancel the moon's pull and stop his transformation. It does not stop it. It kills him. The zealot running the machine is an ex-priest named Kemp. The scientist beside him is Professor Jagged. The beasts have gone native, Kemp says, and beasts belong in cages. A body arrives at the hospital drained of blood, and Mitchell recognizes the work. It belongs to an old vampire friend named Carl, clean for 20 years, who relapsed and killed his own human lover. "You think you're free of it," Carl says, "but it finds you. It's like a bill that has to be paid." Mitchell hides him in the house against George's fury, because it is what he would want done for himself. The cover-up is failing. The coroner, Quinn, who used to bury vampire kills for Herrick, has grown a conscience and wants out. And without him, a second post-mortem exposes everything. So Mitchell arranges to smuggle Carl out of the country on Ivan's ship. Annie has her own predator. A property developer named Saul gets close to her, but Saul once died for 6 minutes in a crash and glimpsed the corridor of the dead, and the men behind death's door use him. They scrape him back to life to lure Annie toward a door in the house, and George barely wrestles her back. Saul dies for real soon after in a drink-driving crash, and in the wreck, he hits Hugh, who lives, but who can no longer see Annie at all. Under all of it, Kemp's people are listening to bugs planted in the walls, confirming that all three types now live together and pass as human. And out in the vampire world, a chant is starting to build. The same two words over and over. Long live the king. They mean Mitchell. The killings have gone public. Students are dying by the river. The press are shouting the word vampire. And the chief constable summons Mitchell, assuming he is the new Herrick. To keep the peace, Mitchell is forced to take the throne he never wanted, standing in the old church ordering every vampire to renounce blood and go clean. Daisy laughs at him. "You cannot change a shark's nature. The only reason there is chaos is his vendetta, and he can clean up his own mess." George, meanwhile, distracts himself matchmaking Hugh back together with his ex. X. Mitchell's crown rots on his head. He blackmails Quinn to stay quiet, learns his own vampires are still murdering behind his back, and to prove he has the stomach to lead, he is handed a pleading vampire named Kara and told to execute her by ramming a brick into her mouth, the way Plague-era mobs once killed the suspected dead. He does it. The king is dead. Long live the king. He has become the thing he burned Herrick to stop, and Nina has walked straight into the enemy's arms, surrendering herself to Kemp and Jaggett for a cure, believing it is salvation. The reveal lands. Kemp recruits Professor Lucy Jaggett properly, and her full name tells you everything, because Lucy, the lonely doctor, and Professor Jaggett, the scientist building the cages, are the same woman. Mitchell is dating the architect of the thing, hunting his friends. Annie gets a teacher of her own, a dead Royal Air Force airman named Sykes, who is expert at slamming death's doors shut. He trains her to fight the men behind the door, to read auras, to spot Kemp's agents by the way they hunt the mentally weak, even to taste food again by projecting into someone else's mouth. Anything less than a perfect pass, he warns, and they take her. She passes, and he tells her the truth about herself. She was never meant to be visible. She is a crease in the cloth, an anomaly the universe keeps trying to smooth out. George decides to treat the wolf as one bad night a month, buys a heavy cage, and sedates the transformation with tranquilizers. It works, and it backfires, because the rage he is suppressing leaks out sideways. He swears uncontrollably, snaps at everyone, and nearly beats his boss to death. Mitchell builds a blood addicts recovery group and leans on Ivan to be the respectable old face of it. But Ivan cannot go dry after nearly 2 centuries, so he preaches the message and keeps feeding in secret. And Mitchell lets him, and hates himself for it. At the facility, Kemp and Jaggett run the chamber on Nina and nearly kill her, then pull back, because they still need her alive and believing, as bait for George. A 1969 flashback shows how love once saved Mitchell. Blood drunk among corpses, he takes a fearless woman named Josie hostage, and her refusal to be afraid slowly turns captor and captive into the great love of his life, the one who knew everything about him and stayed. In the present, that same rescue is offered again, and it is a trap. The chief constable drags a convicted child predator in front of Mitchell and orders him to tear the man apart. Mitchell refuses. "I don't kill anymore." So the pressure ratchets all episode. Threats to expose and burn every vampire unless he obeys. George wants Sam and her daughter Molly to move into the house, and both Mitchell and Annie flatly refuse, which pushes George toward leaving them entirely to build a normal life. Annie, meanwhile, is quietly heartbroken, minding a ghost baby for its ghost parents until the real mother reclaims him, forcing her to sit with the fact that she will never have children of her own. Worn down and provoked, Mitchell breaks. Covered in someone else's blood, he goes to Lucy and tells her what he is. "I'm a vampire." Lucy already knew, and she is not afraid, and he begs her to be the reason he stays good, the someone who saves him. She accepts, and when he asks her name, she gives him the one word guaranteed to bind him completely: Josie. The woman hunting his kind just became the love he cannot let go of. You finally learn where Kemp comes from. In 1972, a young vicar named Patrick Kemp watched vampires murder his wife Maria and their child. Everything he is now grew out of that room. He finishes turning Lucy into his weapon, framing the whole war as scripture, ordering her to declare war on her own feelings for the demon she has been sleeping with. Mitchell, believing love is his way out, decides to leave the coven for good. He hands the caretaker job to Ivan and asks him to gather every vampire in the city for one final meeting at the funeral parlor so he can announce his exit. He tells Lucy the time and the place. Lucy tells Kemp the trap is set and Mitchell built it himself. Annie spends the episode as the hidden voice of a washed-up stage psychic, Alan Cortez, but the emotional peak is her own mother, Carmen, still destroyed by grief years on. Through Alan, Annie finally persuades her to stop torturing herself, a goodbye that lets Carmen let go. Then the trap springs. Mitchell gathers his people, begins his farewell, and outside, Lucy and Kemp detonate the building. Nearly every vampire in Bristol burns at once while Kemp prays. Mitchell's plan to escape into love has been used to march his entire kind to the fire. Mitchell and Daisy crawl out of the ashes, the only survivors, Ivan dead saving his wife. Mitchell assumes it was police retaliation, and he and Daisy torture Quinn for the truth. Quinn gives them something worse. Weeks before the fire, a woman came to his office who knew exactly where the vampires would gather and promised there would be a fire. Her name was Lucy. When Mitchell later corners a hospital chaplain for the surname of a doctor named Lucy, the answer lands like a blade. Jaggett, his lover, and the scientist building the cages are one woman, and she burned his people alive. arrive. George is unraveling in the ordinary way. Over-suppressing the wolf and getting the clocks wrong, he begins transforming in front of a room full of parents at Molly's school, terrifying the child and shattering the fragile normal life he was building. He had just proposed to Sam. Molly will not come near him now. And Mitchell does the darkest thing in the whole story. Grief-stricken and severed from everything that kept him human, he boards a stalled train in Box Tunnel and slaughters all 20 passengers, while Daisy cheers him toward open war on the living. The Box Tunnel 20, a crime that will follow him. Blood-soaked, he hands George his keys and warns him to stay out of the cities. George and Annie drive to the enemy's facility to try the cure, and as they go, Annie asks the quiet question, "We're not coming back here again, are we?" Mitchell, hunting Lucy, walks straight into the heart of the organization built to destroy him. Welcome to freedom. The finale plays out inside Kemp and Jaggett's operation, an old bank full of chanting soldiers of the cause, with George, Nina, and Annie somewhere between guests and specimens. George is starved of meat, so the demon in him stays weak. Annie is invisible to everyone but the people who already know she is dead, and Lucy is falling apart, haunted by the ghost of a werewolf who died in her chamber, staring at the body bags stacked for the people she was told she was curing, finally understanding that this was never a cure. It was extermination in a lab coat. George and Nina nearly go through with it anyway. Nina admits she is not afraid it will fail. She is afraid it will work, that a human life with George is so wanted she cannot bear to hope for it. They decide to try, but then Mitchell arrives, killing his way through the building for revenge. And when he and Lucy finally face each other, she names the dead from her chamber, and he tells her flat out that she is a monster now, just like them. Then Kemp does the unforgivable. He needs a death to open a door, so he murders a captive and performs his rite on Annie. And despite George and Nina screaming, Annie is dragged through death's door. "I'm not ready," and she is gone. Mitchell, blood mad and barely recognizing his friend, nearly finishes the slaughter, but George talks him off the edge. "They are monsters," he says. "We are not." The 3 survivors run to the countryside. 3 weeks later, a shattered Lucy tracks them down, and Mitchell lets her stay, because forgiveness has to be offered first. But Kemp followed her, and Kemp attacks, fatally wounding Lucy. Her death tears open a door, and through it comes Annie, who reaches out of the land of the dead and drags Kemp back through with her, saving them all. Then Annie appears on the television, transmitting from an afterlife that turns out to be an endless waiting room of numbers and forms and bells. And she is in trouble for taking Kemp, because there is no form for that. "Please don't forget me, will you?" Mitchell swears they will get her back. And in a quiet room, 2 vampires named Daisy and Kara kneel over a scatter of old bones and open their own veins across them, because blood heals. And if you want to be standing here when whatever they are rebuilding sits up and asks for a drink, the subscribe button is right there. The bones begin to knit. Herrick is coming back. Herrick's bones finished knitting somewhere in the dark, and the 3 who used to live in a pink house in Bristol have fled to a rundown seaside bed and breakfast in Barry, Wales, because a man who slaughtered 20 people on a train needs a town nobody photographs. Annie is not with them. Annie is on the other side, in a waiting room of numbers and forms, watching men in the afterlife build a special room to drag her to hell. Then she flickers onto the television begging, and Mitchell decides he is going to die on purpose to go and get her. Mitchell dies on cue. Slipping across beside a dying man, George eases out with the Shema. His guide is a bright, riddling young woman named Leah, who walks him through doors into his own past. A trench in 1917, where he poisoned the first friend he ever killed. A Sheffield Christmas, where he murdered a woman named Sally. Leah keeps pressing the same nerve. He was never just a victim. He enjoyed it. Meanwhile, Tom McNair and his father are trapped by vampires running a dogfighting ring, and George and Nina, mid-transformation, are thrown into the same basement and turn. At the bottom of Purgatory, Leah lines up the Box Tunnel 20 and names them one by one until Mitchell breaks. "I'm a murderer. I loved it." So she frees Annie, but she charges a price on the way out, a prophecy dropped in his pocket like a coin. He is the last piece of someone else's story, and that someone is going to kill him. A werewolf, a wolf-shaped bullet. Annie wakes beside him in the living world, overjoyed, baffled that they live in Wales now. And Mitchell laughs the whole thing off, a man joking about the weather while the storm quietly learns his name. Annie appoints herself Mitchell's guardian angel, and forges a reference to land him a hospital cleaning job, where George finds a teenage vampire named Adam draining his own dying father. Adam behaves like a permanently randy schoolboy, and when the father dies, the household inherits him. A fastidious vampire named Richard Hargreaves also finds Mitchell, offering escape to the old ones in South America. Mitchell refuses. They pawn Adam off on the civilized Hargreaveses, whose feeding without killing turns out to mean a caged blood slave. Adam refuses to drain the boy and chooses the household instead. Meanwhile, Annie decides her whole existence hangs on Mitchell, so he sends Adam off alone with the only advice that keeps a monster honest. Surround yourself with good people. Find someone better than you. And on the news, a chirpy little segment has turned the wolf-shaped bullet prophecy into a sporting fixture. Mitchell's gonna get got. Annie drags home a drunk girl named Sasha, who can somehow see her and who turns out to be a rotting corpse in total denial, a zombie, a Type 4, who will not believe a word of it. The worst story is how she got here. Sasha and 3 others came back to life at the exact moment Annie was pulled off the other side. Annie's resurrection jammed death's door open and spilled these souls back into ruined bodies. We made her, Annie says. We owe her. Nina hides 3 positive pregnancy tests and quietly plans to end it, terrified of raising a child of monsters. And Mitchell hunts down a copycat fanboy who tries to restage the Box Tunnel Massacre, staking him to kill the legend before it spreads. Sasha dies for good in the house, and a moved Nina asks George if he'd like a little hairy baby with her. And Annie tells Mitchell she has known what he is since the first day, and forgives him. It's who you are now that counts. They begin. 2 dead things, finally deciding to be alive together. George and Nina go hunting the McNairs to learn whether a werewolf pregnancy can survive a full moon. McNair swears it can, and spins a warm little story about Tom being born a wolf to a heroic mother later killed by vampires. Nina, a nurse, does not buy a word of it, and secretly runs the boy's blood against the missing persons files. The truth is uglier. Tom was a human baby whose parents were torn apart in an animal attack, and the animal was McNair himself. Newly turned and out of control on his first wild night. He killed the parents, scratched the child, and raised the orphan on a comforting invention. When Nina forces it into the open, Tom grabs his father by the throat and runs. Mitchell, rattled by the prophecy and by werewolf hunters living down the road, does something cowardly. He tips off Richard Hargreaves that McNair is prime fighting stock, handing him over to buy the vampire's goodwill. It goes exactly as wrong as it deserves to. The Hargreaves cage father and son to fight to the death, and Mitchell has to race in and fix what he broke. But McNair knows what Mitchell did, and he says the thing that lands like Leah's prophecy said twice. You think one good deed cancels out everything you've done? Someday soon, somebody's going to get you. Bang. Tom leaves for Cornwall to learn who he really was, and Mitchell walks home with a second stranger, now promising him a bullet. An ultrasound says the baby is healthy. Then George at work turns a corner and finds a ghost from a grave he helped dig. Herrick is alive, found amnesiac and whimpering in a psychiatric ward, the decapitation that killed him at the end of Series 1 somehow undone, and he does not remember a thing. Nina smuggles him out as Uncle Billy before the police can photograph a man with no reflection. The house tears itself apart over whether to kill him. Mitchell's answer is instant: stake him. George, staring at a terrified old man who does not know his own name, cannot do murder in cold blood, and a frazzled community nurse named Wendy keeps turning up to assess Uncle Billy, while everyone plays house over a vampire in the attic. Kara, the vampire who brought Herrick back, admits she did it on his own instructions, some inheritance trick he taught her. Mitchell, desperate to learn how Herrick cheated death and maybe dodge his own prophecy, bargains to restore Herrick's memory. But when Kara begs the amnesiac to name her his chosen one, he coldly tells her she is nothing, and Mitchell drops her too. George blocks the stake and refuses, invoking the lesson he means to teach his child, that someone is worth redeeming no matter what they've done. Mitchell relents, and Nina finds Herrick's hidden scrapbook of butchery, agrees to keep it their secret, and does not yet understand she is already the thing he is using. "You're a little bullet," he tells her, and she smiles. The episode ends with an anonymous call to the police. Come to Barry. Ask for a man called John Mitchell. A flashback fills in the trick. A vampire may name a single heir, a dark angel who can drag him back even from a death there is supposed to be no coming back from. And Herrick once offered that bond to Mitchell across 100 years of friendship. In the present, the still amnesiac Herrick is starting to dream in blood. George, meanwhile, reconciles with his estranged father and finally tells both parents he is a werewolf and they love him anyway. The real machinery grinds on underneath. A sharp, self-deprecating detective named Nancy Reed arrives to interview Mitchell after that anonymous tip, played for comedy and quietly deadly serious. Annie, furious anyone would pin the murders on Mitchell, sets out to solve them herself, carrying a photograph of a beautiful young victim she was handed in purgatory. And up in the attic, Herrick lures Nancy toward the place where Mitchell secretly buried the box tunnel dead, then turns to Mitchell with the old smile finally surfacing. "I'm coming to get you." Annie papers the house with a crime board and pins the massacre on the wrong vampire, a woman named Daisy Hannigan Spiteri, because Mitchell fed her the name as a decoy. But Nancy finds that name belongs to a woman dead since a 1941 air raid, and stops believing a word out of Mitchell's mouth. Herrick, meanwhile, keeps priming George to accept killing as heroism, murmuring that in a secret war, some murders only look like murder. Then, everything breaks at once. Nancy's colleague runs Mitchell's fingerprints and gets two impossible matches: a murder in 1960 Sheffield and prints in the blood inside the box tunnel carriage. Somehow your guy is the guy. Herrick's memory comes roaring back, and he wakes covered in blood, himself again, never cured at all. And armed police storm the house. Mitchell confesses the massacre to a devastated Annie, refuses to run, and finally lays down his weapon and lets them take him, giving his birth date, the 29th of July, 1893, and begging not to be arrested in Wales. Upstairs, the restored Herrick corners a pregnant Nina, tells her he wants Mitchell to suffer for months, and stabs her in the kidneys. This isn't a game. This is revenge. Mitchell, 20 minutes from a transfer to maximum security, begs Annie to break him out. She refuses, ready to stand beside him while the whole world learns what he is. But Herrick smashes in and frees him anyway, because Mitchell still needs the survival secret out of him, and the two of them vanish into the night while paramedics count the dead in the house behind them. Annie is pulled back to purgatory, and there Leah finally tells the truth. There was never a prophecy. She invented the wolf-shaped bullet on the spot to poison Mitchell's friendships, because she cannot see the future and cannot make anyone do anything. She is one of the Box Tunnel 20, and this was only ever revenge, a plan to trap Annie on the other side forever and let Mitchell drown in the loss of her. But the lie has grown teeth. Mitchell has carved his own name into a wooden stake. The bullet is real now because he made it real. And Annie, offered the chance to be as cruel as the woman who wronged her, chooses mercy instead, talks Leah down, and is let go. Herrick drags George into a cage and orders him to kill Mitchell, and when that fails, orders Mitchell to kill George. Instead, Mitchell thanks Herrick for a century of memories and stakes him. Proper dead this time. And then, an old one named Wyndham strolls in uninvited and announces the vampires are taking the world back, a patsy already framed for the murders. The age of the vampires begun. He intends to keep Mitchell alive as a weapon, leashed by threats against George and Nina and their impossible baby, which is the one thing Mitchell cannot allow. He knows with total certainty that he will kill again, so he asks George to do it. It has to be George, because only George's grief is heavy enough to bear it. And to make it possible, he lies, cruelly, that he only ever kept a pathetic, needy George around to feel superior to something. Then he drops the act and tells the truth. He is terrified of the faces of the people he has not killed yet. He would rather end here, human, than live as their attack dog. George picks up the stake. "You were the love of my long life," Mitchell tells him, "and you were the love of mine. You made me human. All of you." Then George pushes, and John Mitchell, who died in a trench in 1917 and spent 100 years trying to be a good man, crumbles to ash on a hilltop above the world Herrick meant to conquer. Gone. The world is under new management now, and George is left holding the stake. A quick word, because this is the point where a lot of viewers quietly give up. The show is about to take people you love and rebuild the entire house from the ground up. Stay in your seat. The new trio earns every inch of what the old one built, and the story gets bigger from here, not smaller. Mitchell is gone. And Nina is gone too, beaten to death in an alley by vampires in motorcycle helmets, because werewolf blood is poison to them and they came prepared. What is left is George, holding a baby daughter he refuses to name because he can only picture the name on a headstone, and Annie, guarding them both. Far away in a ruined future, a young woman leads a human resistance and hears that New York has fallen. Vampires poured through the sewers and cut throats and did not even bother to feed. The Earth, a voice announces on the radio, belongs to the vampires now. Back in Barry, Tom McNair is still hunting. In Southend, a dying old werewolf named Leo lives with a ghost named Pearl, and a very old, very controlled vampire named Hal York. And an angel tells Leo that a ghost and a werewolf are guarding the child who will save them all. The vampires want the baby too. A modern one, Nick Cutler, films George and Tom transforming, hungry for proof. When the vampires finally get the child, the full moon reveals she is completely human, no wolf in her at all. They order her killed until the vampire recorder produces a prophecy carved on human skin. She is the war child, born of two werewolves, raised in a house of werewolf, vampire and ghost, and destined to bring the death of the vampires. George breaks into the ritual, forces a half transformation with no moon in the sky, and kills the vampire who ordered his wife dead. But forcing the change has destroyed him from the inside. Dying, he holds his daughter, finally names her Eve, makes Tom promise to always protect her, and goes to find Nina. In the future, the grown Eve steps through a door into the land of the dead and says the only thing that can save the world. She is going to kill that baby. With George buried, the house needs filling. Leo, Pearl, and Hal make the journey west to Honolulu Heights because Leo believes baby Eve can heal him. Tom nearly stakes all three on the doorstep. Annie, moved by an old man's faith, lets them in. Hal is the interesting one. 55 years dry, ritual-bound, terrified of himself. He sees the skin prophecy in the same house as the child and quietly concludes the impossible. Eve really is the war child. He was meant to find her. Annie stages a healing ceremony for Leo. It fails because the strange energy in the house was never the baby. It was Pearl, and 55 years of love for Leo she never once said out loud. Annie, who knows exactly what it costs to leave things unsaid, pushes her. Pearl tells Leo she loves him. Leo says he has loved her since the moment they met and will die loving her, and does in her arms. Two doors open at once, and the pair of them cross over together, but not before making Annie promise to look after Hal, which leaves Hal grieving and furious that his new god let Leo die, nearly coming to blows with Tom until Annie talks them down. So, Hal moves in. A werewolf, a vampire, and a ghost under one roof again. Then the recorder returns with a warning. Something is coming for Eve, and it is coming from every direction at once. Grease on a cafe griddle, and a 500-year-old vampire holding the scraper like it might bite back. Money is tight, so Annie has put Hal to work. 50 years dry, she reasons. He can survive a fortnight next to Tom. The two of them loathe each other beautifully. Hal begging to be killed rather than mop another toilet. But an old subordinate recognizes him. Hal was not just any vampire. He was one of the old ones. Lord Hal. A vampire named Fergus finds him and offers him the throne of Barry on one condition: step aside tonight and let them kill Tom. Meanwhile, the recorder tells Annie there is a new figure in the prophecy, a nemesis, a man with a burnt arm. Frightened for Eve, Annie decides to run. Fergus storms the house that night, and Hal, who spent the whole episode wavering, makes his choice. He pretends to take the throne, lets Fergus gloat, then stakes him through the heart. The lodgers are family now. Annie unpacks, and somewhere out there, a man with a burnt arm is still coming. A new ghost arrives claiming Nina sent him from the other side to help with Eve. He knows a private detail that seems to prove it, so Annie lets him in. His name is Kirby, and Kirby is a liar. He is very good at it. He flatters Annie, needles Tom about being ordered around, convinces the boy the others are secretly planning his 21st birthday. He murders a suspicious doctor by simply stopping his heart, savoring the little beat of tenderness just before. He blackmails Hal with the atrocities he committed centuries ago. One by one, he peels the household apart until Tom storms out and Annie orders Hal to leave, and she is alone with him exactly as he planned. Then Kirby drops the mask. He tells Annie she is plain and boring and unlovable, that her neediness is what drove Mitchell to suicide, and the cruelty is so precise that Annie begins to dissipate. He was sent, he says, by the woman from the future to kill the baby. He is a child killer who murdered 5 women and wormed his way into their families, but he cannot quite do it. He stands over the cot holding a baby he cannot bring himself to harm, and a re-empowered Annie, furious and whole again, dissipates him mid-brag. The family reunites over a chocolate birthday cake. Alone that night, Hal rolls up his sleeve. There is a burn on his arm. He may be Eve's nemesis after all. fake claw marks, and a torn-up body left where a journalist is sure to find it. This is Cutler's plan. Stage werewolf attacks, feed them to the press, and let a frightened public beg the vampires for protection. A returning teenage vampire named Adam and his succubus lover Yvonne pass through, cursed and happy anyway. The darker thread is Pete Travis, a journalist who has hunted vampires since one killed his mother. He lures Cutler to a hotel to expose him. Cross on the wall, trap set. But he invited Cutler in, and an old one does not fear crosses. Pete dies for his trouble. The episode ends with Cutler uploading Tom's transformation footage online, the werewolf expose live, and a strange young woman finds Tom to tell him he is about to become very, very famous. She found him through the video, Allison Larkin, a geeky werewolf who watched Tom transform online and came looking for him. Tom falls for her hard, but a new vampire boss, Golda, demands Tom for a dogfight, and Cutler retaliates by turning Tom and an increasingly bloodthirsty Allison loose on his own rivals. Allison starts to enjoy the killing, so Tom does the kind thing and sends her home, reminding her she is human every day but one. Meanwhile, Hal meets a sharp Scottish woman named Alex Miller in the cafe, and is so terrified of his own hunger that he abandons her mid-date. Tom shames him into calling to apologize, planting a second date that will not end well. And Annie, having helped a dead neighbor cross over, turns to find a young woman waiting for her. It is Eve, grown up, come back from the future to tell her mother something. The something is unbearable. Grown Eve takes Annie on a tour of the future and shows her how humanity fell. Vampires killing the Prime Minister live on television. Refugees slaughtered at the docks. Country after country going dark. She shows Annie that Tom dies branded in a fighting camp, and that Annie herself dissipates after burying friend after friend, and she reveals the worst of it. In the original timeline, Hal never leaves the vampires. He becomes Lord Hal, their most ruthless commander, the architect of the camps. The only way to stop all of it is for Eve to die, and Annie is the only one who can allow it. Hal, meanwhile, is being pulled back down. Cutler makes him drink human blood to prove his loyalty, and Hal, God help him, breaks and drinks. We learn why Cutler hates him so much. Decades ago, Hal turned Cutler, then lured his wife Rachel to the door and made him watch her die and drink her blood. That betrayal built the man. Blood drunk, Hal shows up to his date with Alex acting like a predator, and she storms off into the night, where one of Cutler's thugs is waiting. Cutler unveils the plan. On the full moon, he will drop a transformed Tom into a nightclub full of teenagers with camera phones and film the massacre that terrifies the world into the vampire's arms. Tom smells the trap in time, and with Hal, and with the help of a furious new ghost named Alex, who has just discovered she is dead and that Hal drank her blood, they empty the club before the slaughter can happen. Alex is the house's ghost now, and Annie comes home knowing what she has to do. The old ones have arrived, led by Mr. Snow, an ancient, quiet horror in whose bloodline every vampire, Hal included, was born. Cutler greets them, and Snow humiliates him. I have already forgotten your name. So Cutler decides to burn it all down, himself included, because the vampires now know the whole prophecy. For humanity to be saved, the war child must die, which means, for the vampires, Eve must be kept alive. A living savior keeps humanity passive and waiting to be rescued. That is the funny thing about saviors. Everyone in the world wants Eve dead now, except the monsters. Tom and Hal build a bomb. Cutler comes to the house to kill Eve himself, since her death is the death of every vampire alive. But Annie cannot let a child be harmed, and kills Cutler instead, and realizes she has just handed the vampires the future. At the warehouse, Snow's hold over Hal is total. He is in our DNA, Hal says, nearly dropping the bomb to Neil. Snow offers Annie a bargain. Raise Eve, lie to your friends, let them die to keep the child and the vampires alive. Annie refuses. Realizing Hal is not a living thing and will survive, she takes the bomb, holds baby Eve close, and detonates it, killing herself and the child and every old one in one blast. Tom is pulled clear. Hal is teleported out by Alex, and Annie Sawyer, having finally done the thing only she could do, watches her door appear and steps through it. In the future that will now never happen, grown Eve fades away, thanking her. A soft-spoken government man named Mr. Rook quietly buries the whole affair, because his department exists to keep the world from ever knowing, and Tom, Hal, and Alex are what remains. Hal tied to a chair, mid-relapse, Tom promising to break the cycle like a fever because Hal is his best mate. Alex is newly dead and learning the ropes. Hal is chained to a chair, detoxing, being spoon-fed mashed banana because the last time he tasted blood, he swore an oath that the next time meant death. They finally free him on strict terms, and he swears it on the memory of Eve, then immediately produces a color-coded cleaning rota. There is a war on, though nobody quite understands it yet. Werewolves and vampires have been killing each other for 7 years, and a captured werewolf leader reveals the reason. They are all at war with the devil, who feeds on the conflict. Tom and Hal, sacked from the cafe, take jobs at the Berry Grand Hotel, home to a poisonous old man in a wheelchair called Captain Hatch. When Hal walks in, Hatch complains that it has suddenly got very hot in here. Then Hal, driving home, hits a man with his car, and to save him, turns him into a vampire, breaking the oath he swore that same morning. The trio decide the confused new vampire is their shared responsibility rather than their kill. Patronized his whole life, he renames himself Crumb, the crumb that choked the world, delighted to finally be somebody's nightmare. A civil servant named Dominic Rook offers Hal command of Britain's vampires. Hal refuses. And in the hotel, Captain Hatch whispers to a grieving guest, watches her die, and murmurs that he has not felt this good in years. Captain Hatch plants an Employee of the Month competition at the hotel, purely to set Tom and Hal against each other, because their conflict is what feeds him. Hal keeps trying to lose and keeps accidentally winning, and the fussy manager Patsy openly favors him over Tom, until Hal defends the boy so fiercely that Patsy quits, then sheepishly rehires them both. Alex, meanwhile, discovers another ghost in the house, a Victorian child named Oliver, hiding from the men with sticks and rope. Collectors who drag away ghosts refusing to pass over. Alex helps him move on. But the men were never after Oliver. Hatch sent them for Alex, the piece of the Trinity he wants gone. She barely escapes, and they leave a warning. The end has begun. He will rise. Elsewhere, Rook, desperate to save his closing department, engineers a killing to prove supernaturals are dangerous, and Crumb kills 2 of his own family. Alone at last, Hatch stops pretending. He has waited most of a century for a vampire and a werewolf under one roof. He only has to stir them up and wait for the power to rise and carry him out. He is going to scorch the earth, and he is getting stronger every day. A washed-up television personality named Larry Chrysler checks into the hotel, secretly a werewolf. Tom, starstruck that a werewolf can be famous, takes him on as a mentor, and Larry preaches ruthlessness, moves in uninvited, and slowly poisons Tom against Hal. Hal, meanwhile, visits Lady Mary, a ghost who believes she was his last ever victim, and that watching over her keeps him clean. Alex forces him to tell her the truth. She was not his last. He has been clean for over 50 years. Mary, heartbroken, moves on, but leaves a warning that lands like a stone. The man that killed her is not gone. He is sleeping, and he is a very good liar. Larry breaks Tom completely, and Tom quits and retreats to McNair's grave, ready to give up. Hal finds him and tells him the truth. Everyone has a monster pulling their strings, and worth is proven by standing toe-to-toe with it and spitting in its face. "You are a good man," Hal says. "The best I have ever known." Then Larry, humiliated and evicted, phones a number. Captain Hatch answers. "I believe I have some work for you." With his department days from closing, Rook dumps his loose ends on the house. He guilts Hal into taking charge of Crumb and another new vampire, Alan, and billets a simple-minded werewolf named Bobby on Tom. Bobby was bitten as a child, lost his whole family in the same attack, and has lived his entire life inside Rook's archive, worshipping the man who calls him a savage. Hal sets up his test of will. 2 glasses, human blood, a slow death by craving, and werewolf blood, an instant one. Either only if you ask for it. Redemption, he insists, is still possible. Tom, ashamed of how he treated Bobby, takes him under his wing, gives him a job answering the hotel phone, even finds him an old machine so he can hear the last voicemail his dead mother left him. Bobby idolizes him, but Hatch and Rook conspire to trap Bobby at the hotel over the full moon, hoping the carnage saves the department. Tom arrives in time to lock himself in with Bobby and prevent a massacre. Furious it failed, Hatch scratches Rook's wrist, a mark that will matter. Crumb, cornered and broken, drinks werewolf blood and dies. And Bobby, having survived the moon and dared to hope, gets a whisper from Captain Hatch and hangs himself. Tom is gutted. Alex starts to suspect something is orchestrating all these deaths, and alone in the dark, Hal picks up the last flask of blood and drains it. Rook's people live by a mantra: no care, all responsibility. Come in, clean up, feel nothing. A young woman named Natasha flees into the hotel, and Tom, smitten, hires her on the spot. What Tom does not know is that Rook raised Natasha and planted her to charm the werewolf and break the household apart. She sees Hal is struggling and offers him a secret arrangement. She will let him feed from her 10 seconds at a time, so no guest gets hurt, on the condition that he stakes her if he cannot stop, and that Tom never finds out. Alex, meanwhile, is closing in on Hatch. She finds an old file proving he was a witness to a death in this hotel back in 1987, and connected to every death since. She confronts him directly. "What are you?" And Hatch answers plainly that he is only the devil, sweetheart. Then it all comes apart. Hatch orders Natasha to frame Hal, then whispers her toward a knife, and she dies by her own hand. Tom finds Hal over the body and assumes the worst. Alex, disgusted less by the feeding than by Hal hiding it, exiles him. Natasha's ghost confirms the truth to Alex before moving on, but the damage is done. Hatch traps Alex inside her own coffin where she cannot teleport out and leaves her buried. Hal exiled and back on blood. Tom set on revenge. The Trinity, finally, in pieces. The finale opens with everything broken. Hatch is at full strength, having killed everyone at the hotel. Hal has slid all the way back, waking a pub full of new vampires with a sing-along preaching vampire supremacy. Alex, terrified in her coffin, finally calms herself enough to phase through it and escape. Tom, bent on vengeance, walks into Hal's pub and kills the new vampires, and the two old friends fight until Alex breaks it up. Then Hal tells them the whole truth. Captain Hatch is the devil. His power comes from the war between werewolf and vampire. A century ago, he was bound into a human body, and the only thing that can finish him is a ritual performed by a vampire, a werewolf, and a ghost. The catch is that nobody who performs it survives. Rook, terrified after his own visit from the devil, confesses the rest. Hatch wants the emergency broadcast codes, the switch that seizes every television and radio in the country, so he can whisper to the whole world at once and drive everyone to kill themselves. The trio chase him to the studio, past streets full of the dead. Hatch flings the three of them into separate dreams, each offered the life they never got. Hal is returned to a battlefield in 1514, dying human before he was ever turned. His old friend Leo, begging him to just let go. Alex is home with her family on the day of the date that killed her, her father asking her to cancel it. Tom is settled and happy, expecting a child with Allison. The wolf gone, a paper wolf folded on the table. Each of them sees the trap. Deep down, Tom says, "We are human." They refuse the dream and wake up. Rook, his department suddenly reinstated, shoots the old man Hatch was wearing, but the devil simply moves into Rook, and Rook, seeking his own redemption, tells them to do it and lets himself be killed with the devil inside him. The ritual takes all of them. The devil is destroyed in a burst of light that seems to kill the Trinity, and then quietly, they wake, human. Hal thinks the curses died with the devil. Alex can feel the cold. Tom's wolf is gone. Hal is no longer a vampire. They start to talk about ordinary lives, about Tom going to see the family who buried him, about Alex deciding whether to stay. The desire to be human, Hal says, is the end, not the beginning. To want it is to have it. You have already won. Then the camera drifts across a shelf. Mitchell's gloves, George's Star of David, Annie's mug, Eve's ultrasound and her bib, a carved wolf and a steak, one of Hal's dominoes, the scrap of paper Alex wrote her number on the day she died. Everyone who ever tried to be human under this roof, all of it in one row. And it comes to rest on a small folded paper wolf, the one Hatch made inside a dream and holds there, and never quite tells you whether any of them ever really woke up at all. And that is the whole thing. 5 series, 36 episodes, 3 monsters at a time trying to do the one thing none of them technically qualify for: be people. The show never lets them off easy. George dies, forcing a change that saves his daughter. Annie gives up her own existence to end the vampires and finally earns the door she spent 5 series being denied. And the last trio walk into a ritual they know will kill them, because that is what being human turned out to mean in this story. Choosing to die for someone else. Over and over. Being Human gave its monsters a real ending. So does every show on this channel. If shows that stick the landing and then break your heart are your kind of thing, hit subscribe, because that is how the next one gets made. And it is already waiting. Sons of Anarchy. Another family that chose each other and paid for it in blood.